voters in the Central African Republic prepare to go to the polls. We'll have details on what's at stake. A look back at Africa's top health stories of 2015. And how do movie makers do it? A closer look at the technology that's being called Hollywood's engine. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Now, Central African Republic voters head to the polls Wednesday to elect a president in a ballot seen as critical to reuniting a nation torn by sectarian violence. Campaigning ended Monday in a festive spirit as people flooded the streets of Bangui to show support for their candidates. Now, the country has been plunged into chaos since the mainly Muslim Seleka rebels seized power in the country, majority Christian country, in early 2013. Abuses by the Selekas fueled the rise of Christian militias who launched reprisals against Muslim civilians in a campaign of ethnic cleansing. Thousands of people have died and nearly 25% of the 5 million CAR residents have fled the country. The violence. Now, the unrest has also repeatedly delayed the polls. Well, for the latest CAR election news, VOA's Katarina Hoyger joins me live by phone from Bangui. Good evening, Katarina.
Good evening.
Now, there are concerns there, of course, of violence in the period just before the elections. But how can you describe the situation this evening in Bangui?
Well, the situation in Bangui has come down, and many say this is because of Pope Francis' visit just a couple of weeks ago, when he went first to the cathedral here in Bangui and then also visited a mosque in the Muslim majority neighborhood Pekasen. People are also looking forward to the elections after initial troubles organizing them, logistical difficulties, and also getting all the voters' cards to the voters. The population here now say that they're ready to vote, hoping that it will reunite the country and reconcile the population.
Katerina, in terms of the campaigning, what would you say about the leading candidates? Did you sense that there was a lot of caution in the message they were delivering to their people to ensure that they won't incite violence?
Of course, the candidates have called for the voters to be voting in peace. What is worrying are the many armed groups that are still in the capital and in the countryside that might disturb the elections. There are also worries that these elections are organized in a haste and that there might be some insecurities, for example, people not being able to vote at some polling stations. The candidates, however, have called for voters to be aware and also report any irregularities they see.
What level of security is there from the CAR security forces, but also the United Nations and African Union?
Well, the United Nations is the force mainly securing the elections, both polling stations and voters. You have about 10,000 peacekeepers in the country. There's also the French forces, Sangaris, who have deployed in critical voting places where the votes will take place in Bangui, but also outside of Bangui, mainly in Bosangoa, which is the former ex-president François Bozize's hometown. The fact is that the army, the national army, is not present in many parts of the country. They are basically limited to Bangui in the northeastern part of the country, which is still controlled by the rebels. There are no national troops.
Okay, we hope for the best. Katarina, stay safe. Thank you very much. Well, viewers, Katarina Hoyger reporting from the Central African Republic. Now, to West Africa, residents in northern Nigeria are on edge following suicide bombing attacks that have killed at least 48 people. The attacks came just one day after the army battled Boko Haram terrorists west of Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State. The first blast on Monday took place at a mosque in a Maiduguri suburb where the army had exchanged fire on Sunday with suspected Boko Haram fighters. A Nigerian army commander says the second attack occurred in Adamawa State, where two female bombers triggered their bombs in a crowded market. There was no immediate claim of responsibility. Well, many African residents suffered through a hungry year in 2015. In East and Southern Africa, El Nino and climate fluctuations have provoked serious food crisis. Conflict in southern Sudan and the Central African Republic have had the same effect as have poverty and a population boom in the Sahel. VOA's Anita Powell has more.
Hunger has hit Africa hard this year, as climate change, conflict, and enduring poverty have ravaged multiple countries and left tens of millions of people in dire straits. Countries as diverse as South Sudan, Malawi, and the Central African Republic have sounded the alarm in recent months. The United Nations World Food Programme says sub-Saharan Africa already has the world's highest prevalence of hunger. 1 person in 4 is undernourished. Every day in Africa, 23 million children go to school hungry. The agency's David Orr says that in the lower half of Africa, where weather is the main culprit, 2015 has been an unusually difficult year.
I think what makes things different this year is the combination of drought and then an El Nino weather event coming right after that, so that people are effectively being hit by 2 consecutive years of reduced rainfall, and it's particularly difficult on a region where 70% of the population are subsistence farmers.
But African governments say they too have an important role to play, and that the hunger crisis is their failure as well. Malawi's Minister of Finance earlier this year described his nation's hunger situation as a scandal.
We have to be doubling our efforts to ensure that where it is possible for us to excel, we must excel.
In Ethiopia, the government has committed a record sum, $192 million, amid news that as many as 10 million people will face critical food shortages next year because of a crippling drought.
The government is very vigilant, and we have a National Disaster Preparedness Committee which convenes every Monday to assess developments every week.
Elsewhere on the continent, such as in South Sudan, the problems are trickier. There, 2 years of brutal conflict have played a huge role in pushing hundreds of thousands of people to starvation. Aid officials say relief agencies can only do so much on their own.
We and the other humanitarian agencies are there to support the governments, and that's more and more what we are doing, not just providing lean season relief programs and other forms of food assistance, but actually giving technical support and institutional capacity to really increase the ability of governments to solve these problems for themselves.
Ultimately, they say the solutions cannot come from abroad. If Africans are to combat hunger crises in 2016, African governments will have to take the lead. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Well, the second day of talks between the Burundian government and the opposition have ended Tuesday in Uganda. The government, however, has expressed a disappointment with the group invited to represent all opposition parties in Burundi. Regional powers called both sides to Entebbe for discussions aimed at ending months of fighting. Clashes erupted in April when President Pierre Nkurunziza's plan to seek a third term triggered street protests and an attempted coup in May. Continued fighting in Burundi have raised concerns of a possible civil war, and there has been no sign of reconciliation between the government and opposition groups who say Nkurunziza's re-election bid broke constitutional term limits and a peace deal that ended a decade-long civil war in 2005. Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54. Check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Well, coming up, Africa Health Highlights of 2015. Stay with us.
Hamilton Live is a live audience performance. With live music, you have that interaction. There's nothing like getting that immediate feedback from the folks that you're performing to. they feel it and they respond back to you. You see it in their eyes. You know that you're connecting with them. Like if any form of communication, it's that response to get back.
Welcome back. Joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mado with some good news in the fight against Ebola. Lino.
The World Health Organization is declaring the Ebola outbreak in Guinea over on Tuesday. The announcement comes 42 days after the last person confirmed with Ebola tested negative for a second time. The Ebola epidemic began 2 years ago in the West African nation, and more than 2,500 people have died from the virus. At least 9,000 people died in neighboring Liberia and Sierra Leone. Both countries were declared Ebola-free by the WHO, but Liberia has had new cases since the declaration. However, experts say Liberia could be declared virus-free in early next year if no new cases is reported. The World Health Organization says Guinea now enters a 90-day period of heightened surveillance.
As of today, for the first time in 2 years, we can say that all three countries have stopped the original chains of transmission which were driving this crisis and had led to such international and national alarm last year. We have to be very clear that although today is an important milestone, it's only a milestone. It is not the end of the Ebola response in West Africa, because what we've learned is while we've stopped the original chains of transmission, we're also seeing small flares, 1 or 2, 3 cases occurring. We've had 10 events like this where the virus is reintroduced from the survivor population.
Now, from lowering child mortality to major vaccination campaigns, let's take a look at some of this year's top African health stories. There is good news in Uganda. Child deaths have fallen faster in Kampala than in any other African city, despite a large influx of refugees flowing in from neighboring states with conflict. Healthcare centers like Kisenyi are being credited for partly contributing to this positive outcome. Esther Kabumo is a refugee from Congo.
We're happy because they welcome everyone without discrimination. They treat everyone equally. If you don't have money to buy medicine, they take care of you. There is no problem here. That is why we're happy to come here.
The Kisenyi Center provides free maternal services in a well-equipped facility. Advisors at the center also encourage expectant mothers to seek antenatal care. Turning to West Africa, in October, Nigerians made an attempt to break a Guinness World Record as part of cancer campaigns by forming the largest human pink ribbon in the world. Experts say the majority of cancer cases are now occurring in the developing world, where effective treatment and detection remain inaccessible for most.
I came for this event because I've lost my aunt to cancer, and my mom is also a proud survivor of cancer. Cancer is a monster I feel that we really need to fight in Nigeria.
On the Ebola front, the West African nations of Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone conducted major nationwide immunization campaigns to protect millions of children against preventable but potentially deadly diseases for the first time since the start of outbreak. The three countries most affected by Ebola also vaccinated more than 3 million children against diseases such as measles and polio. Vaccination coverage for diseases other than Ebola was reduced as health clinics and healthcare workers focused on fighting the unprecedented outbreak of the deadly virus.
People are afraid to go to a health center because they think they might be suspected of having Ebola. But today, thanks to the awareness that has been raised, they have come to receive their vaccinations.
Ebola remains a health concern on the continent as scientists and health workers battle the virus that has killed over 11,000 people. Now, 2/3 of humanity will live in cities by mid-century, according to the United Nations. Rapid and planned growth in many of the urban areas of the developing world has people, livestock, and wildlife living in close proximity with inadequate sanitary services. As microbes evolve in these new environments, researchers wonder what new germs might emerge that could launch the next epidemic. VOA's Steve Baragona has more.
Joseph Mwai is a farmer. He raises cows, pigs, chickens, and goats, though it's not entirely by choice, he says.
It's modern for me because I don't have any job to do. I make a living from there.
Mwai's farm is in the middle of Nairobi's Viwandani slum. A trash dump smolders behind his homestead, across a stream polluted with raw sewage. It's a rich environment for the spread of bacteria and other microbes.
You've got people, you've got livestock, you've got wildlife mixing together in this stew of garbage and human waste and animal waste. The opportunities for microbes to exchange genes and mix and match in new ways is tremendous.
Because microbes that pass from creature to creature pass their genes around too.
Yeah, especially the resistant genes to drugs.
John Keru is a molecular biologist with the Kenya Medical Research Institute. He says, for example, his team found bacteria called E. coli that are resistant to 4 antibiotics. Then they found resistance spreading to other germs.
The same block of resistant genes that we had found in E. coli were actually now in Salmonella.
Even more concerning, cholera germs may have also picked up those resistance genes.
High resistance, high virulence. Actually, what you end up creating is a superbug.
But scientists know very little about how any bugs move through this complex environment. So a team of researchers are visiting households across Nairobi. They're swabbing people. They're swabbing livestock. They're sampling the ground with white paper booties. University of Liverpool veterinarian Judy Betteridge explains why.
To try and understand on a small scale, I mean, even within just sort of 20 meters, how are those bacteria shared? And then when we scale it up, are the bacteria here being shared with the household that's 50 meters over there or 100 meters over there? So how far can they actually spread?
And can they spread further through food, for example? Once they find out, Keru says, they need to be careful not to point fingers.
We are not necessarily investigating who is spreading the resistant or the virulent organisms, but actually we are trying to solve a problem.
The problem to solve? The conditions that spread new germs through the slums of Nairobi and beyond. Steve Baragona, VOA News, Nairobi.
And that's our Africa Health Report for today. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Lenore. Be sure to watch Lenore Madu every Tuesday and Thursday for the latest health news in Africa right here on Africa 54. Well, for now, virtual reality is still mostly associated with video games, but computer chips that process video images are getting better and better at fooling our minds and could soon be able to convince us we are someplace we're not. Scientists say this could open up an entirely new generation of VR applications ranging from medicine to public security. VOA's George Putage reports.
Scientists at the University of Maryland computer lab called Augmentarium, together with physicians from the university's Shock Trauma Center, are mixing virtual reality with the real world, creating something called augmented reality. Wearing special goggles, soldiers on a future battlefield would be able to see critical data without averting their eyes from the scene. The same technology could help surgeons in the operating room.
Right now, I put the probe on you and I have to look at a screen over here. And the patient monitors may be up here and I'm not really looking at the patient. So you can imagine if I was wearing these glasses and I put the probe on the patient, now I can look directly at you. We're still talking, and now I can look at your heart. So it makes it much more immediate. Fusing images from multiple surveillance cameras into a virtual reality could also help security officers more effectively monitor different areas.
This would also allow the campus public safety officials to walk into or teleport themselves from one point on the campus to another point on the campus. This could allow them to decide what would be the appropriate calibrated response to anything unusual that they find.
Researchers admit that virtual reality headsets are still bulky, but they point out that early smartphones were also large, had low battery life, and no touch interfaces.
Today, as the smartphones have gotten smaller, they are more portable, a whole field of social media engagement has emerged out of the smartphones. And we believe something similar is going to happen with the virtual and augmented reality headsets.
Scientists say with sufficient funding, this innovative technology could be available in 3 to 5 years. George Putic, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, the eye-popping technology that has been dubbed Hollywood's engine. We'll be right back.
L'épidémie de la maladie à virus Ebola en Guinée est terminée.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Esther Gidou-Ewart. Here's what's trending. Are you tracking your steps or monitoring your heart rate when you exercise? If you are, then you're trending in 2016. Wearable technology is the hottest trend for the new year, according to the American College of Sports Medicine's annual fitness trend focused. Wearable technology includes fitness trackers, smartwatches, heart rate monitoring, and GPS tracking systems. The second most popular trend for 2016, bodyweight training, an exercise regimen using minimal equipment, making it more affordable than other plans. Also on the list is yoga, still very popular and based on ancient traditions. Yoga uses specific body postures to promote health and relaxation. Next up, who is the most overpaid actor of 2015? Believe it or not, Johnny Depp came out on top. According to Forbes magazine, his recent movies returned just $1.20 for every $1 he was paid on them. Depp will be hoping to do better with upcoming sequels, Alice Through the Looking Glass and Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales. Also on the list, Oscar winner Denzel Washington, who made $6.50 for every $1 he was paid. The list is compiled by examining the box office takings of the last 3 films each actor starred in before June 2015. And finally, the world is a little less loud today. Old school heavy music legend Ian Lemmy Kilmister, the Motorhead frontman whose outsized persona made him a hero for generations of heartbreakers and metalheads, has died. His agent told the Associated Press that Kilmister died in Los Angeles on Monday after a brief battle with aggressive cancer. He was deeply respected and revered as a rock master and innovator from his time with the seminal psychedelic band Hawkwind in the early 1970s to his 4 decades in Motorhead, best known for their 1980 anthem, Ace of Spades. And that's what's trending today, Vincent.
Thank you. Now, lights, camera, action. Well, 2015 was the year of the IMAX and 3D. Practically all big-budget movie productions were offered in both formats. And though tickets are quite pricey, opening weekend earnings showed that moviegoers were willing to pay more for a special movie experience. VOA's Penelope Pulu reports.
Nothing will stand in our way.
finish what you started.
It's no secret, and even less of a surprise, that Star Wars The Force Awakens broke the record for the biggest box office debut weekend globally, with ticket sales of $529 million. And that does not include the Chinese markets, where the film debuts on January 9th. According to Zarth Birch, director of theaters and entertainment at Smithsonian, many moviegoers are happy to pay more to watch the film on huge IMAX screens for an all-immersive experience.
They've created this incredible world, and it's this fantasy world that is so endless, so engaging. Of course, it spans multiple generations. I think that IMAX is particularly relevant with the 70mm experience.
And it is not just Star Wars. Before J.J. Abrams' sci-fi blockbuster swept the box office, Jurassic World, the latest in Universal's dinosaur franchise, opened this summer in IMAX and 3D, stomping the competition. On its first weekend, it grossed a breathtaking $525 million. A studio invests in IMAX and 3D formats when it can predict huge profits. Famous movie franchises such as Avengers are a sure bet. Movie lovers prefer to watch high-octane action flicks on huge screens instead of their TV sets. Avengers: Age of Ultron has so far grossed close to $1.5 billion worldwide. The Hunger Games' final installment in IMAX and 3D is also among the top grossing films of the year. Pixar's animated IMAX 3D films, The Good Dinosaur and Inside Out, were among this year's top earners, attracting families with their witty scripts, wonderful colors, and masterful animation. But not all IMAX films are successful. Ron Howard's whale of a film, In the Heart of the Sea, about the sinking of the American whaling ship Essex in 1820, an event that inspired the novel Moby Dick, was shot down by the critics as a tale without a soul. This is a good example how the thrill of a story can be lost in the visual extravaganza and technical details. Still, IMAX and 3D formats will continue to do well, offering bigger, brighter, and better stories on huge theater screens. Penelope Pulu, VOA News, Washington.
Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, African News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. This American English idiom does not seem to make much sense.
Jump the gun.
How can someone jump a gun? Let's listen.
You can't begin the project yet. You're going to have to wait until the plan is thoroughly developed.
Okay, I won't jump the gun, but it is difficult. I am ready to get started.
Me too.
If you jump the gun, it means you do something early or too soon. The saying comes from foot races. An official starts a race by firing a handgun. If a runner starts before the gun fires, we say he jumped the gun. The runner is then out of the race. In most situations, jumping the gun is not a very good thing to do. And that's English in a Minute.